Hello, audience members, and welcome to my presentation covering a synthesis analysis of Parkay et al.'s curriculum leadership readings for developing quality education programs, looking mostly at chapters 5, 6, and 7, although I do use a lot of resources to back up what these authors are talking about. Today I'm going to be talking about content standards, benchmarks, and performance standards. Then I'll get kind of into the key players of who should plan the curriculum standards. Then I'll jump into technology's impact on planning, curriculum, and instruction. And then I'll get in a little bit to the pros and the cons of technology. Then I'm going to finish off with some emerging trends in educational assessments, and then I'll finish with kind of a conclusion slash professional educational takeaway. You'll see four subsets in this presentation because this is a little bit longer, hopping out around 30 slides or so. The first part is going to cover content and performance standards through slides 4 through. First thing you have to start with is content standards, right? Um, Ajay et al. In 2019, they kind of said that they're the representative realities of a profession, discipline, or educational goal. They're the pre-agreed upon content, knowledge, and skills, also known as CKS, and they should be acquired by students across multiple content areas, such as math, science, reading, English, as well as electives like theater, physical education, journalism, etc. I think you need to have some standards on what you're going to cover. Otherwise, random students are going to have random teachers teaching them very different things. Um, Basically, they are what the student should know and be able to do. A lot of times they're broken down into benchmark standards. It's what the student should know at specific times throughout the course, pre-designated times. I like to think about it as stepping stones from one great location to another. Where do you want to go? How are you going to get there? And benchmarks let you know if you're getting closer to that destination or further away. I think it's important here to add that these benchmark assessments, they're not just random. They really, if they use good data, they will help teachers and administrators monitor that student progress towards those predefined goals that are in content standards. All right. They also help teachers, parents, and administrative staff make decisions about these students backed up by applicable data and information. It's really hard to make decisions about students without the data to back it up. Some examples of real world content standards here because I am a theater teacher. These are from the Florida Sunshine State Standards, also known as CPOMs, but students will be able to share reactions to live theater performances, and students will identify the jobs people can have in a theater. Now, assessments of this can be taken periodically throughout the course via a written test or even a rubric-based assessment. But basically, you have to see if the students understand this content. Content standards are important, but a lot of people have moved to performance standards. And these views are a little bit more in the arts, which I'm used to being a theater student. Basically, they highlight the skill, ability, or aptitude or proficiency gain shown by students. Um, I like to think of it as emerging assessment of human activity, and it really highlights student performance related to that predefined content areas as in those content standards. Um, However, the assessment and the criteria of the assessment really needs to be clearly defined and articulated to the students. There must be transparently and mutual understandings. Um, Basically, the student needs to know how they're going to be assessed on their performance, right? I think it's important to go over rubrics with students and be on the same page. These are also useful in showing a student's improvement of their task abilities and standards and over time, right? But that's very much connected to the transparency of the performance standards. Once these standards are clearly articulated and the students begin to engage in real time with these standards, then authentic assessment of their performance can begin. All right, and I think there's really three things you have to look at, right? Which is the rules, criteria, and standards, and those are going to guide the students to achieving their desired outcomes and goals. One great way performance standards can be assessed with is with a rubric, right? They're very useful in the arts, which I use quite a lot as a theater teacher, and they basically provide that framework for tracking student skill and growth over time. Or they also allow staff and teachers and even students to show their progress over time. For example, the first time they do a monologue, they might get scores of 2 down the line. And then they practice that skill over and over again, and they can see those skills go to exemplary in the 3 or 4 category. All right, and once again, kind of connected to the previous slide, these also show clear expectations, and they also give a prompt evaluation and learning. All right, and they can be used in peer assessment, summative, formative, and performance evaluations. So this is an example of a real world rubric I use for assessing my student monologue performances later in the year. I basically look at vocal techniques, concentration, rehearsal, memorization, and physicality. Now, if you look at, they can go from below proficiency, that's not memorizing their lines, just standing up there, not moving their body, and not rehearsing, all the way to being proficient in their performance, right? How is their vocal technique? How are they rehearsing? Is the memorization? How is the physicality of their characters? Now, this particular rubric is a license agreement from Education Alive. It's one of the resources I use for theater, which aligns quite well with Florida theater content. Another thing I really like about this is I can use it kind of as a non-graded assessment when they first start my monologues. Right? I still give them the scores, it just doesn't go in the grade book, and then I tell them what they need to do to improve. And then when they get to doing it again when it's graded, they are really happy to see those scores go up. So I think it's really useful as an assessment tool and as a tool to help students improve their performance over time. Next, we're going to move on to part 2 of this presentation. We're basically going to look at the key players and some of the methodology used in curriculum design and implementation. We're basically going to look at professionals, teachers, parents, and even students and how they can really put their input in design curriculum, which is useful for everybody, and particularly the community as a whole when they finally come together and plan a curriculum together. But I'll get to in the next couple slides. Before you get into who should plan the curriculum, I think it's important to start from the beginning. Basically, curriculum is Latin for racetrack. Think I like to think metaphorically like the Roman chariot racers, right? They had to memorize these tracks to become the very best, the layout. How are they going to get to the end point? All right. Um, I like kind of put forth 4 questions in design curriculum, which are quite important, right? What educational purposes should the school seek to attain? What educational experiences can that that are likely to attain these purposes? How can these educational experiences be effectively organized? And how can we determine whether these purposes are being attained? All right. And then Parkay et al. 2014 kind of adds a few different levels. There's the macro level, which is planning specialists at the national, state levels, and policies that really affect large bodies of students. For example, the No Child Left Behind law, right? That is a macro level curriculum law. Now, there's also the micro level. Sometimes at a district level, but usually more at the school levels, right? These are decisions that affect students in very specific classrooms or schools. Added to this, Parkay also really expresses the need for understanding time. Right, curriculum planners have to look at the now. What are affecting students now, right? How's technology affecting them? How's the culture affecting them? What is going on right now at this very moment that we have to plan for? However, nothing stays static, right? So curriculum planners also have to plan ahead. And it's a little bit hard, but they have to match the two, right? They have to meet the students now in time. However, they have to utilize emerging trends, emerging technological developments, and kind of match the two, right? It's kind of an interpretation of the needs now and then future needs of students, right? And you're basically integrating the present and emerging trends of the future. A good curriculum will use both teachers and specialists, right? It should use various perspectives, including multiple stakeholders, improving those outcomes and learning and pedagogical processes, right? However, students themselves should have a part in the curriculum and have their voices heard and what they want to learn and why to and the why, right? This is going to improve student agency and self-directed learning. However, I think specialists are also important from various academic fields, right? They have the expertise, they have those higher degrees, EDDs, PhDs, etc., right? And anthropologists, for example, might shed insight on cultural shifts over time. A sociologist might shed light on values, beliefs, or norms. And, for a historian, might look at historicity of a specific topic and how ideas on that topic have shifted over time. However, if you only use specialists, sometimes the curriculum gets overly complex or overly technical, right? And that's going to be too hard to implement large bodies of students. So it's important to use a specialist, but then you have to use that kind of complex terminology and bring it down to a level that students, parents, and teachers can understand and implement in their class. As the previous slide said, it's important to use those specialists and people with those very high degrees and expertise. However, parents and community leaders also must be included, right, at least on a yearly basis to give their perspectives, right? This really helps uncover what that community sees as most important and most critical in education. All right, and it also provides what's called the sensitivities of that community, right? If these sensitivities or anything unique to that community goes unnoticed, right, this often ostracizes students of various cultures and backgrounds. Sometimes if you're able to implement, it's important to help students kind of co-create that curriculum, or if not create it, at least let their voices be heard, right? Let them kind of speak on what they want to learn, speak on how they want to be assessed, obviously while still following state standards, right? If possible, they should be involved in that planning process, how learning will occur and how they're going to be evaluated. Um, these voices can kind of be implemented at various predetermined intervals throughout the course, right? After a module gets finished, maybe there's discussion how it went, how they want the next module to go. Students want to be heard and understood, all right? Letting them voice their opinions on what they're learning, it's going to build trust, inclusion, and student motivation. Here's a real world example of how all these key players can come together, right? My school is a private school. However, we still follow the content standards and the state standards set forth by the state of Florida. There's also the district level, which is Columbia County, and they have complete transparency on the curriculum, which is all online for parents to download. They can download the curriculum maps, they can download assessments, and they can also download the data about all the yearly testings and where students are at collectively, right, compared to other states and other districts. However, parents are also allowed, mostly on a monthly basis to come and let their voices heard and what the students are learning and what they want more of or less of. And students also have student council club where they can kind of get their voices heard if they want more particular club, more of a particular class. For example, a lot of people on the student council said they want more theater class, so next year there will be more theater classes added throughout the year. In my particular classroom, I let students vote on assignments or choose ones from a list. For example, when they were doing a lesson on characterization, they got to choose between making TV commercials or movie trailer scripts. And at the beginning of the year, I also let them write a list of everything they want to learn, and I try to incorporate as much as that as I can along with the stuff that the state of Florida wants me to teach. And oftentimes I can match up the two. I also let students oftentimes pick their assessment, right? I'll teach a class and then students can choose from an activity such as an essay, a PowerPoint, a comic book strip, a short skit or play, and each of these will have their own rubric. So there's transparency and students know what they're being graded on. Um, However, at the same time, they still receive traditional quarterly assessments in all the core areas. So that the whole staff can use this data to help them, right? If they need to improve on math, they need to improve on reading and writing, and it helps us make informed decisions. Previous slides kind of covered the need to plan for the present and need for planning for the future and emerging trends. Well, something that fits squarely in both of those is that of technology. Obviously, students are using technology more and more in the 21st century. Mostly everybody has a computer at the house. Students have cell phones. Technology is everywhere in the classroom, in the workforce, and at the home. So curriculum planners, teachers, and staff must plan for technology now and also kind of emerging trends in technology as it grows more and more. And planning for technology in the curriculum, I think it's interesting to kind of metaphorically look at three areas: the map, the road, and the elements, right? The map is the curriculum or the curriculum content, and it's going to dictate the what to teach. Kind of a roadmap with specific benchmarks, in a way leading to overall objectives that students should accomplish. However, you also need a road to get to the end of that content, right? The instructions and the instructional strategies are kind of like a road that leads to the endpoints on that curriculum map, right? Parkay et al. Says the instruction is the how to teach that leads students to desired outcomes. However, right, if you have the map and you have the road, well, there's also elements, right? And the elements are basically the meaningful curriculum coupled with suitable instructional methods, right? And those together lead to an effective learning environment where students can learn and grow. That are very important here. Those elements must be authentic and meaningful to students, right? They must meet those students where they're at now and kind of meet them culturally and socially what they're going through in the current day. However, at the end of the day, technology is a tool. It is not the end all, the be all. Curriculum has to be innovative, right? It's going to provide students with knowledge, skills, and values, right? And as previous slide says, those KSVs must be appropriate for the present and the future. When planning for both, technology is going to hold a critical place for students, the workplace, and also entrepreneurship utilizes technology. And curriculum must reflect all these changes. All right, so technology as a tool is going to help these students reach their desired goals or end states. However, technology should not be the one size fits all, right? Technology can be differentiated and based on students' needs, abilities, and interests. One thing I love to use as a former history and now a theater teacher is that of virtual field trips. Obviously, whenever I can, I like to take my students and take them to see real life plays and things of that nature. However, sometimes we can just do a virtual field trip of maybe a beautiful theater building in another classroom, or in history, right? We can look at the caves with all the cave plant paintings, right? Believe it or not, virtual field trips, they do improve student interest in all academic subjects. They're really good for contextual analysis of primary sources, right? When students look at these primary sources, well, they can start to look at the locations where these primary sources are from, right? They're going to improve student independence and motivation. And what's really great, they're most of the time they're free or low cost, they're easy to implement, and they're great for online learning or blended environments. And basically, you can travel the world from the comfort of the classroom or their home. Another thing that I want to start using more and more, and which has shown a lot of promise, kind of letting students be more creative and also kind of reflect a growing job market, is blogging, which is online postings, right? There's a lot of websites that kind of can be used in-house so that students aren't sharing a bunch of personal information at themselves. However, blogging does improve student reading because they're going to read and interact with their peers' their post. All right. They're also going to seek credit from teachers and peers through those interaction and those comments that they receive. You know, they really do love receiving comments saying, I loved reading your post, or this is really interesting. All right. And they're also going to improve their perceived learning, right, by reading each other's blogs and writing their own blogs and commenting on others. What's really great, this could be used in multiple content areas, math, science, or even theater, right? It can also kind of be used in portfolio assessments, what I'll get into in just a little bit. Technology is critically important. It is everywhere today, and there's a lot of pros for it, right? It's going to improve collaboration, right? Students can work together collectively, um, building stuff in Minecraft or working collectively on a Google Doc or building a PowerPoint together. It does personalize learning. It allows them to access information that moves far beyond the confines of a textbook, right? Once you have a textbook, what's in that textbook is what's in that textbook, right? But if you're doing stuff online, you can click on links, you can do a little bit of research, you can really go past all those written words. And it does improve student engagement and experimentation. However, there's a lot of concerns and cons of technology in the classroom and curriculum. Um, One thing is not all students have equal access to computers or fast internet. Right? If you tell them to go home and they have to research a bunch of stuff on the computer, well, that's not really fair or equitable to students with lower internet speeds or no internet speeds. There's also a lot of concerns over student safety, right? They have access to a lot of information. They also have the ability to post a lot of personal information about themselves, which can be accessed with people with not their best interest and a lot of predators seeking them out online. So that is a big concern amongst teachers, parents, and even students. And there's also a lot of growing concerns over students' mental health. Particular Facebook and TikTok and time spent on them has been shown time and time again to create a lot of depression and anxiety amongst students. And there's a lot of growing concern over how much screen time students can have, right? A lot of people argue if people need to go back to traditional books in the classroom or kind of differentiate between the two. Um, There's also a lot of over-reliance on technology in classrooms, right? Students go on, they log onto the computers, they watch a YouTube video, then they go onto a bunch of websites. Is the teacher really any teaching anymore? And there's also issues with student or teacher hardware. I've known a couple times in my classrooms, I've had a video up or an assignment that was due online. However, maybe the internet was down that day or that website stopped working. So, always test your equipment, your software, your hardware, and also have backup, right? Have stuff on paper that students can do, right? Don't have an over reliance on technology itself. Next, we're going to look at some emerging trends and assessments. Um, we're not going to look at all the trends and assessments, just a few of the most recent ones and kind of what they hold for teacher, staff, and curriculum planning. Parkay et al. In 2014 really start with a few questions that curriculum planners and teachers should be asking themselves when planning assessments. Obviously, why are they assessing? What are they trying to inform and be informed about students? What are they trying to gain an understanding of? Once they know that, well, then they move to what assessments are they going to use? And honestly, there needs to be some type of standard or some type of criterion to use and interpret the data from those assessments. And the last part, and probably one of the most important ones, right? How are they going to use that data to help students or to assist students in making informed decisions about the students? They also need a clearly defined way of how they're going to inform students and parents of this information, whether it be a phone call, an email, a conference, putting stuff in the grade book. I think it should all be thought out from the beginning. Standardized tests of obviously taking off post No Child Left Behind. Most states have state standards or follow national standards. Um, and basically means students are scored in a uniform manner, right? How the test is taken, scored, and interpreted are all standardized across the wide student body. It's all the same, which means standard, right? And it's actually really great for comparative analysis across district, state, and national levels, right? You can see if one district is scoring higher or lower in math, reading, or writing, and it really does help students and parents make informed decisions about their students. A lot of pro adherence to standardized testing, they argue that these objectives and standards, they should create a even playing field for all students. And they also help teachers, administrators, and other key players in education make very informed, critical decisions based on sound data. However, a lot of other people, especially critical pedagogists, argue that really standardized tests are just perpetuating a market-based education system. And it also perpetuates marginalization across class and race lines. Um, And also kind of others argue if we're only looking at cognitive functions or how well a student can memorize something, it's really going to decline or ignore other assessments or other areas of student performance, including social and emotional development. I think it's important to use a holistic approach looking at social, emotional, and cognitive functions. And I think standardized tests do hold a place. However, there also needs to be multiple tools and multiple assessments to give a kind of holistic view of a student's development over time. Ongoing trend and one I particularly love to use in my theater class is that portfolio assessments, right? These are really good for the arts, photography, theater, advertisement. They really do empower students by showing what they know and what they can do. And it also shows their growth and proficiency over time. Really, a carefully selected portfolio by students, um, it reflects what the arts are going to do post graduations, and it's going to help them in future careers, right? If students can walk into, let's say, an art exhibit and say, here's my portfolio, and it's already made, that's going to help them. And I think it also creates a sense of pride in their accomplishments, right? Portfolios really are a form of student expression. It improves peer collaboration and interactions. Basically, students become empowered, right? As their projects and accomplishments are viewed and recognized by others, they really do get a sense of accomplishment and pride. Another assessment that is growing across multiple educational communities, that of peer assessments, right? It's basically done informally. It helps assess and collaborate and gain insight from diverse perspectives. A lot of times it might be easier or less critical for students to receive feedback from their peers than an adult authority figure. Um, it's also important because it provides insight, right? It gives the evaluator and the evaluated students insights in improving their work. They basically both learn from each other. It also helps students practice self-regulation and use higher learning strategies in all their tasks. Sort of a real-world application here is I use peer evaluation throughout my theater class. I like to use them before I give a graded performance. For example, when we're doing monologues, students might do a couple practice ones where they receive feedback from both myself and their students. They usually score each other from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, with additional feedback from students, a lot of times in the form of an informal discussion. However, it's also very important to create mutual trust at the beginning of the year and talk about constructive criticism. I think students need to all be on the page with this when doing peer evaluations. For a lot of the bigger projects, I might give out awards or privileges for students with the highest peer evals. Something silly as, students get to sit in the gaming chair for a semester or something like that, or sometimes win a gift certificate or some type of privilege. Kind of adds a little bit of external motivation, a little bit of fun throughout the course. Really want to take the time to thank all of you for sitting through this presentation, which lasted roughly about 30 minutes or so. I know it's a long time to sit and be present with me. Just a few closing thoughts here is, I think it's very important that curriculum planners work with and through communities to make informed decisions. I think it's important to hear students' perspectives so that it creates a sense of agency and understanding. Moving on to technology, I think it's great to implement and utilize, as I talked about before. It can't be the end all use all. I think it needs to be used very specifically based on student needs and interest. And I think standardized testings and assessments important, right? You need very concrete, specific data to make informed decisions about students. However, it can't be the end all of everything. I think portfolio assessments are growing, rubric-based assessments are growing, um, and students need to experiment. Students need to show performances, right? It's not just about what they memorize, but also about how they can perform in giving context or scenarios. So I think it's important to incorporate all these things in a holistic way. And at the end all, putting us all together is all about student growth, right? Understanding where they're at and where they need to go, and using that data to make informed decisions about them and trying to get them to where they need to go, right? You think about it, if you're going from island to island, you might have smaller islands through that you kind of use benchmarks for as a stepping stone. At the end of the day, the community needs to involve um, students, teachers, and community leaders, right? A curriculum needs to reflect the needs of that community. And once again, thank you all for being here. After this, you're more than welcome to look through my references if you have any interest of anything I've covered today. I'll also leave my contact information after this if you have any future questions. Thank you.